my honor and privilege to introduce a very unique, extraordinary speaker on an unusual topic. Today we have Conrad Hines telling us about the 1908 Columbus experiment. This revolves around a series of events that resulted in a successful attempt by the city to get rid of a typhoid epidemic by building a new innovative state-of-the-art water and wastewater treatment utility. Mr. Hines is a registered architect in Ohio and the state of New York, and a retired project manager from a City of Columbus, Dublin Road water plant. He is taught as an adjunct faculty member in the Engineering Technology Department at Columbus State Community College for 27 years. He's a graduate of Ball State University in Muncie, Indiana, where he studied architecture and industrial technology. He's originally from Nashville, Tennessee. He's lived in Central Ohio for 38 years and previously worked for the Franklin County Engineer's Office. As a licensed auctioneer, he likes to give back to the community by donating his services to a variety of charitable and fundraising events such as Operation Feed. In addition to being a 42-year veteran of the yodeling art, Conrad and his wife, Janet, have 4 children, enjoy country festivals and visiting historic places. He's a storyteller and an author with a special focus on forgotten American history. Conrad, tell us your story.
First of all, thanks for the invite. I am always enthusiastic to tell the story about the Columbus experiment. The Columbus experiment of 1908, which most people don't know about. Make a long story short, in 1908, it was equivalent to the man landing on the moon. All eyes were on Columbus, Ohio in 1908. Now, our story starts with the Civil War. 600,000 men lost their lives, but majority, that was not in battle. It was due to typhoid, dysentery, smallpox disease. All right. One of the biggest problems with something like typhoid, which is a waterborne disease, especially in that day, one side of the yard you have the well, the other side you got the outhouse. Naturally, that turns into bad news. Now, post-Civil War, 1871 here, as a matter of fact, we are here at the site just across the freeway there, is the actual site of where the first municipal water plant was in fact built, right here at the confluence. And with the progress that we had, within less than 20 years, we upgraded to this fabulous facility. And again, this, up until about World War I, was just across the way there. In other words, when they mentioned the confluence, they were generally talking about the water plant. Now, the smokestack in the rear is the municipal light plant, just to give you an idea as to where we are. Okay. Now, that particular facility, we were really expanding in terms of our ability to pump water. This is on Nelson Road, right across from Sutherland Lumber. This facility was there up until just about World War II, it was torn down. It's interesting that Samuel Bush, the first president's grandfather, as a young man, a young engineer, he actually did the load test on this facility for the city. And it's interesting, in the course of doing that, there was we had what we called fire pressure. In other words, when there was a fire, the alarm also went off at the water plant to maintain a high level of pressure. The alarm came in, and naturally everything did come off as planned, but that was the last thing he wanted to see at the time. He later went on to become general manager of Buckeye Steel. But our story of the Columbus experiment starts with our two sort of forgotten heroes, William McKinley, president, former governor of the state of Ohio, Senator Mark Hanna. Senator Mark Hanna, he was the mover and shaker that really got McKinley elected. He raised more money, good gracious, than anybody ever before. And with that, McKinley was able to spend most of his time on his front porch campaigning. Now, as president, in his second term, there was a bad boy in New York. His name was Teddy Roosevelt. He was a reformer. So how do you get rid of a reformer in the state of New York that has a big ego? You make him vice president. That was a dead end of a career job. All right? Take note of this photo. This is a picture of the president walking to his death. This was the last photo taken of McKinley. This was at the Temple of Music in Buffalo, and he is going up the stairs, and 20 minutes later he was shot. All of a sudden, Roosevelt, who had just been in, my goodness, I think about 6 months, is president. And Mark Hanna was extremely upset. Now, the idea is, the talk was that when the 1904 election came about, Senator Mark Hanna, he would challenge Roosevelt, and for all intents and purposes, hands down, he would take it, because he was known as the kingmaker. He came to Columbus in January 1904, stayed at the Chittenden Hotel, which is where the workers' comp building is now, drank the water, went back to Washington, D.C. He had just pushed the U.S. Senate to approving taking over the Panama Canal project from the French. Okay, so that he was in his heyday. 2 weeks later, he died of typhoid that he got from drinking the water here in Columbus, Ohio. And that thus begins the story of the Columbus experiment. There was a typhoid epidemic at the time, but based on the senator's death, all of a sudden, Jerry O'Shaughnessy, who was head of the Division of Water at the time, and also Julian Griggs, who was the city engineer at the time, they looked to a lady, and take note of this woman on the right, Ellen Swallow Richards. How many of you have heard of her? That is by design. Her contribution to humankind is probably equal to that of Einstein, Sir Isaac Newton. Everybody ever heard of ecology? Of course, we've all heard of ecology. She's the one that came up and developed ecology as a science. Why haven't we heard of her? Singularly, she was a woman. And what was recommended were her students. She taught at MIT, the first woman to teach at MIT. She taught a very new field, which she pretty much developed, called sanitary engineering. And these were some of her brightest students, John Gregory and Phil Burgess of Burgess and Nyepel. Gregory, he was teaching at Johns Hopkins at the time. Gregory, he was working down in, for the state, actually taking a survey of the quality of water in the state of Ohio. But it's interesting to note that Griggs Dam, O'Shaughnessy Dam, Hoover Dam, all three were designed by engineering firms who their founder had been one of her students. By the way, she is remotely given credit for one thing. Do you know what that is? Developing the field of home economics. Now, what's happening here is Gregory came to Columbus. He came to Columbus, and he decided to duplicate on a large scale the work that Ellen Swallow had produced at the Lawrence Experimental Station in Massachusetts. By the way, she did the first water quality survey that was ever done in the United States. Now, with this is essentially a pilot plant just to find out, okay, what is the nature of the water in the Scioto River? Before you know what to do with it or how to treat it, you got to know what the nature of it is and what's going on. Okay. And with that, in 1906, the first thing we had to start with is we had to have a supply of water. What's the capital of Kentucky? Franklin, right. Now, capital of Ohio, of course, here in Columbus. What's the difference? They both don't have water. It's the Columbus experiment. Central Ohio, we developed the idea of let's just build a big canteen. That's what the reservoirs are here. That's the difference in Frankfort. Frankfort doesn't have any water to expand. Okay? Overall, the amount of water, naturally, if we went through the natural streams and the like, there would probably be enough to sustain a population of, a little over 100,000 people. So the O'Shaughnessy, Hoover, Griggs, that was our water supply. This, in its heyday, was just one fabulous project. Now, take note of the design of this dam, this water. This is now called the Griggs Dam. It's just north of us here. It was only built half as high as it was originally intended. I'm going to talk more about that in just a little bit. Okay, there's the intake. The building there on the right, that is the only thing left from the Columbus experiment. That's just about a half a mile up the road here on Dublin Road. You can see it over there on the left. All right, but that was the original intake for the plant. This was the pump station. This was a fabulous building. Unfortunately, it was torn down in 1972. And inside, what you see there, that's the construction of the triple expansion steam engines. What is a triple expansion steam engine? Well, it's the same type of engine that powered the Titanic, believe it or not. All right. Here we have a completed filter gallery. This is one of the things that the plant was doing. We were also filtering the water. Indeed, what we were doing was we were taking the water out of the river, filtering and cleaning the water, and then we were capturing the wastewater and filtering and cleaning that, and then returning it to the environment. Now, essentially, that was what the Columbus experiment was. And we were doing it on a large scale in a cold weather environment. Now, right there, Charles Hoover Dam, young man sitting there on the right. That is Charlie Hoover, just hired there in 1908. Here we are, the clear wells. The clear well that you see on the right, on the left, that's when they're pouring the concrete. That is still in place. And I had the privilege, just prior to retiring here 4.5 years ago, of working on doing some restoration work on that project. And it was great to go inside of those, I call it the catacombs. But the fact that it had been, filled with water for 100 years, the concrete was just, for the most part, 98% pristine. Looked like it had just been poured. Okay, that's the settling in the wash water tank. Again, this was like the Apollo. This was like Cape Canaveral at the time, all right? There's the finished pump station, and there's a completed on the right triple expansion steam engine. The movie The Titanic that was made 15 years ago, if you watch that movie, that is a triple expansion steam engine in operation, okay? Now, here's Mr. Hoover. Fabulous individual, Mr. Hoover. Unfortunately, it's sort of a shame the way that he is forgotten. I like to compare him to Adolf Hitler. For every one person that Adolf Hitler was responsible for having killed, he has, and this is conservative, is responsible for probably saving the life of 100. That's 1 to 100, and that is probably a conservative figure. Bear in mind, at the time that he started his work, the average lifespan was age 47. And it's not that you lived to 47 and then croaked. It's just that, my goodness, majority of those that died every year were children under the age of 2 years old. 100 years ago, it was nothing for a woman to experience anywhere from 10 to 15 pregnancies just to have a family of 6 or 7. But again, that's the fact that we don't recall that speaks to our advancement. Here's Hoover in his lab. This was Columbus 100 years ago. This is where the pollution was coming from. As a matter of fact, if you just take a look straight out there, that's pretty much the same view. But, sewage was going directly into the river. Okay. Clarence Hoover, they were brothers. Clarence Hoover, he handled the wastewater side. And he was the one that was put in charge of doing those initial pilot plant experiments. Okay. Again, that's the inside of the Lawrence Experimental Station where Ellen Swallow Richards worked. Okay, here we are. Now, I mentioned this was not just potable water, but it was also wastewater. Okay, so we were going about addressing this typhoid epidemic in a way that was revolutionary. Now look at this, these sprayer. In the day it was called the innovative Trickle spray system. This system had been tested in the South in a warm climate. This was the real experiment. Now, would that in fact freeze when it got below freezing? That's what they didn't know. And would it maintain its efficiency for the purpose of taking care of an entire municipality? That was the big experiment, and that was what was hailed as just as a worldwide success. This is a building, unfortunately, demolished in 2010. This was over by the, what do you call that? Oh, I don't recall the park now. They're on the south side. But that was the wastewater pumping station. Very handsome building. Okay, very briefly here, I'm just going to touch on this. I just want to touch on the idea of, you recall the picture of the dam that was only built half as high. That was based on the fear from the 1898 Johnstown flood. And that fear came to life during the 1913 flood when 2,000 people in downtown Columbus suddenly took off running east based on a rumor that during the flood that Griggs Dam had broken. And everyone, this whole idea of the 1898 Johnstown flood was on everyone's mind still. So 2,000 people just took off running. Thurber captured this in a book that he wrote. Okay. Needless to say, after the panic and the like, it was everybody was so embarrassed for decades it was never mentioned again. The next day was business as usual. Okay, and there you can see, instead of raising that, they went further north and built the O'Shaughnessy Dam, which was started in 1926. Okay. And in the 1950s, this is a bit of a sad tale regarding the Hoovers. The Hoovers, let's just say the fight over Hoover Dam sort of took its toll for both men. And the key thing was they did not want government financing, federal financing. And this was one of the things that really allowed Columbus to grow because based on his word and his word alone, that was when Jim Rhodes was mayor, he stated that the city of Columbus, the citizens of the city of Columbus will themselves pay for the dam. Okay. And based on that, within 18 months, both Hoovers had died of coronaries. And Jim Rhodes, at the time of being mayor, he made a point of naming the dam after both men. Now, because of that, there's our good friend Sensenbrenner, was able to, many of you are familiar with this, to enforce the city's clout throughout Central Ohio. If you wanted water, you had to be annexed into the city. And this is what allowed Columbus, or let's say kept Columbus from being gobbled up like many other cities, such as Cleveland and Cincinnati, by suburbs. But this was our key clout. And that was also instrumented by Warren Cremeen. But the plant on Morris Road is now named after him. But this was, after I retired, 4.5 years ago, some friends had a contract to write a series of books for History Press, and they got behind on their contract. Stumbling, and then all of a sudden they're grabbing, they said, hey, I know a guy named Conrad Hines. He's always talking about this great 1908 experiment. So with that, I received a call and I said, we're behind here. Can you, and within, my goodness, I think 2 days I had a contract. I didn't have to go through all this business of finding a publisher and getting the rejection letters and all that sort of stuff. So that's how I was able to put this together. And I was really glad for the opportunity because I was able to, the book is now a part of the State Library and the State Archive. And it's also, Denison, OSU, University of Cincinnati. So I'm pleased with that. And a series of the books were just given to the new tenured professors there at the, I don't recall what division of the engineering college it was. But in any way, the Columbus experiment, it was something that we are part of our great heritage as a community, and it's what marks us as a great contributor to the general welfare of the world. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I actually have two. One is, where are those catacombs that you mentioned? And two, did you think, it seems like you are not happy with the buildings that were torn down. Have you ever thought of any way we could change the culture, or can it be changed to preserve buildings in the city the way we do?
You're a mind reader. The catacombs, the clear wells, are just up the road here on the right there where you see the water plant with the big blue. Well, the parking area, that the flat land, underneath that are the clear wells. And the clear wells, it's like a giant mall. Let's say if you took a mall underground. So, but your other question is regarding buildings being torn down. I think the biggest problem with so many buildings, especially here, is that the story is not preserved. What is the building? It's just brick and mortar. And that's what's torn down, the brick and mortar. And that's what I'm trying to do, is to preserve what is the story behind the brick and mortar. And with that, you get appreciation. And with that, it means something, and it's a part of our heritage. Okay. Yes?
Thank you for speaking. I found the history of the safe water in Columbus pretty fascinating. Coming more to present today, a few of us made an inaugural fellowship ale beer a few weeks ago, and we were told that today's water quality, not just the safety, is also greatly enhanced by the pressure Anheuser-Busch Brewery places on the water from a quality standpoint, so that we may just have even better tasting water today than many other communities because of the brewery. Any input on that?
Yes, that's partially true. But the part that is not true is they maintain no pressure on us. They relocated to Columbus based on the standards that we had in treating water. Okay, and yes, whenever they get a new brewmeister, that's, they show up at the plant, we give them a tour, and he says, good job, and they. Right. Yeah, back there.
I had the same question because I too brewed the beer. So mine was the same question.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That's why our fellowship ale was so good.
Because of the quality of our water.
Sure. Well, the whole idea of, yeah, beer. That was interesting. During the typhoid epidemic, that was the one thing, okay, if you didn't want to get typhoid, you consumed beer. So in that respect, for those who were not consuming beer, they were getting typhoid, okay? And so that, that speaks for itself. Okay. Yes?
A lot of members may not know, but Phil Burgess was a member of Columbus Rotary.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
And so was Hap for me.
Okay. Sure. And he was around, my goodness, he was around for a long time. One more? Anybody else?
How are those projects funded then?
By levies, even at that time. It came up for a vote. And that was the whole idea, the senator dying, and then with that, the press and the like, because any number of people were, getting typhoid and the like, but when the senator died, that pushed the issue.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was very interesting. As a civil engineer, I loved it. Thank you. Please join us next week to hear Ted Lape speak about creating wealth through the eventual sale of your business. The meeting is adjourned.